that's that. So for those that don't know me, my name is Hunter Naday, and there's two reasons why Tanner wanted me actually to moderate this. Number one is that I make him sound a lot smarter. That's usually the first reason why. But number two, I'm a bit more handsome. So that way you guys actually have some good to look at, I guess. We'll put it that way. Hey, that's yes. But with that, again, want to just say on behalf of the APP, we appreciate everyone coming out and excited for this discussion with these four very, very smarter gentlemen than I. So we'll kind of just go through, give people an option to speak if they would like, and we'll keep it nice and friendly. Right there, Mr. Rath? That'll be the, that's the, of course. Hey, that's right. Okay, that goes for everyone, though, of course, as well. So my first question would be, and these are from individuals in the audience and that we've heard across, is if a constitutional crisis happens, how or what would a resolution look like, and is there a timeline for that resolution?
A constitutional crisis.
Yeah, if it happens, how or what would that resolution look like, and what would be the timeline?
Well, if we're talking about the Alberta Sovereignty Act, what the Alberta Sovereignty Act does essentially is it's kind of the authority mechanism that allows the legislature to have a broad amount of solutions that they can employ. So if, for example, if the Supreme Court said if there was a if we said we wouldn't enforce the carbon tax, and the government went to the Supreme Court and said, well, is that legal? And the Supreme Court would say, no, it's not legal, obviously, blah, 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 would side with the feds on it, say what they would say. Then what the legislature would do is they would gather and they would have a vote, and the vote would be on, notwithstanding the fact that the Supreme Court has said that the carbon tax must be enforced within the province of Alberta. The province of Alberta will, under authority of this act, will not enforce the carbon tax within the province of Alberta, and that would cause your constitutional crisis. Now, we got to. The key there, though, is the premier at that time has got to have real guts, right? Because they are going to get called every name in the book from Eastern Canada, the media traitor, this, that, the other thing, right? So we have to stand up at that point. We have to say, we don't care what you say, we don't care what names you throw, we're not enforcing these unconstitutional laws within our province anymore. If that was the question, I don't know.
Perfect, yeah, thank you. You want to?
Yeah, just to jump in on that. As far as I'm concerned, we are in a constitutional crisis right now. And the constitutional crisis was apparent when the Prime Minister of Canada went out of his way to completely inflame or attempt to inflame, because they wouldn't take the bait, a peaceful protest in Ottawa by calling everybody in Western Canada, and anybody who supported the Freedom Convoy, every name in the book, in the hopes of provoking riots on Parliament Hill to give him the cover he needed to invoke the Emergencies Act. As we know, they wouldn't take the bait, but of course, because all these people seem to work on whatever script they have, whether it makes any sense or not. The act was invoked, notwithstanding the fact there was no real emergency. And at the same time this was going on, we had a group of armed eco-terrorists destroying a construction camp in northeastern British Columbia, and the response from the government has been, the next day was to have Jagmeet Singh and numerous other Liberal members of Parliament stand up and say, oh, but don't worry, when we invoke the Emergencies Act, it won't apply to environmental activists. So we can literally have, and again, when I was a kid, I was a combat engineer, and I have lots of friends that are ex-military, including guys that were JTF-2 operators. These guys are going, look, Jeff, JTF-2 has a Hercules on standby to deal with attacks on critical infrastructure. We have a multi-billion-dollar, democratically and regulatorily approved pipeline that's being attacked by eco-terrorists, yet people with bouncy castles are the national emergency. We are in a constitutional crisis, and the only way that I see to get out of it is to pass the Referendum Act as quickly as possible and vote to get the hell out of this mess.
And you two want to speak? You're good on that. You guys are good on that? Good? Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. one other question. I think that a lot of people have this question. It's a fair one. And that would be, what would tax collection look like? So I guess I'll give both options. If we were obviously to stay or to leave, would Alberta take over all taxes, some taxes? How would it look?
Well, I'll go. Tanner, you go first.
Oh, Alberta you'd have to take all of it. Now, again, it's the federal government. The simple answer is Alberta would have to control taxation. And then you'd make it much lower. This is why we're proposing this flat 10% tax. The taxes are nonsense how high they are. They're exorbitant. It's socialism, as far as I'm concerned, because it contemptibly removes your ability to generate the wealth that's required in order to exist with the highest level of well-being possible in order to satisfy some self-interested politicians in Ottawa. And so we agree quite plainly with the Free Alberta strategy, which is take control of that. This should be Alberta's jurisdiction.
Oh, well said. I concur. We take that over right away. Start an Alberta Revenue Agency immediately. Collect all provincial taxes. And Quebec right now is trying to also collect all federal taxes and then they remit the federal portion. Because right now, of course, they're trying to reverse it, right? Exactly. Great idea. Why don't we do that here? Why don't we collect the provincial and the federal taxes, and then we'll remit to the feds the portion that they deserve? How about that? Which might not be as much as they hope.
That's always been my view on that, is that we should be collecting all of the taxes in Alberta, and then Alberta can decide what it's going to remit at the end of the day. And I hope nobody else missed the fact that so-called equalization was up for renegotiation on the 18th of April, and Jason Kenney did nothing. Or I'm sorry, on the 18th of April, 2019, and Jason Kenney did nothing.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. One more question that we've got here as well would be, if we're looking at Alberta's role within Canada and even out of Canada, what would our leverage look like? Like, why would Canada ever let us become independent? Why would the court side with us here?
That's right up your wheelhouse.
Well, like with the Supreme Court, the secession reference decision of 1998, like that's Canada's constitutional law. That's not a decision that the Prime Minister gets to make for himself. I mean, the Parliament filled in kind of some of the details of the secession reference case with what's called the Clarity Act. There are many scholars, especially in Quebec, who say that the Clarity Act is more rigid and more strict than what the secession reference case allows for. The secession reference case itself mentions that if the federal government tries to, like after, let's say a province passes a successful independence referendum, with clear majority, clear question, if the federal government tries to negotiates in bad faith as a way of preventing the province from getting out, the province would, it doesn't suggest that the province should declare unilateral independence, but it suggests that might be what the province would do next. Like if the government does not negotiate in good faith with the province, it's actually violating the constitutional law, and the province, in a sense, then would have some kind of justifiability in moving beyond that. So like the key thing, and I want to emphasize this, the important thing is the democratic will of Albertans. If we pass a clear, like we've got a clear majority on a clear independence question, that is the key thing. And what Ottawa does ultimately, I mean, they might try and stop with certain obstacles and stuff, but what really matters is what Albertans want, and we will be the ones who decide, because we will have supporters, in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world. I mean, the Americans, if they see that we really want out, they're not going to support Ottawa against us. Right? Because they won't go against a majority. Well, I mean, it's unlikely. I mean, we don't know, we can't say anything 100% with certainty for the future, right? But we can only go forward with what we know. And what we do know is the constitutional law allows us to become independent under these conditions of the clear question and the clear majority. That's what we know, and that's what we have to move forward with. And we can't, allow potential things in the future that might block us. We can't let those things stop us from moving forward with what we do know. We do know what the path is. We've got to follow that path, and we have to deal with these unknowable things in the future. We can't let, I know people bring up to me, what about this? What if the government does this? And what if the government does that? Well, we can't know that. All we can know is what we have now, and we move forward with what we know now and not get tangled up with what this might happen, what that might happen. Let's just move forward with what we know, because that's what we do know and what we can do now.
And something that I wanted to add, and that's why the Alberta referendum petition project is so near and dear to my heart. When you read that petition, it's a petition for that form of question to be put to the citizens of Alberta. The question was drafted with the secession reference in mind. It was drafted with the Clarity Act in mind, but it also makes it clear that Alberta is going to be leaving Canada free of any debt to Canada. And again, both Rob and Tanner touched on this earlier, and I believe Michael may have as well. But a number of years ago, I did a fairly large case on behalf of a First Nation in northeastern BC who were cheated out of approximately $10 million in the late 70s by the federal government. And of course, by the time we'd done working with our actuaries and had run the math on, what the interest rates were, especially going through those ultra high interest rates of the 80s, that $10 million rapidly turned into 148, right? So when everybody hears that number, and we've talked about opportunity costs and the rest of it, I can tell you just on a pure actuarial basis, using Bank of Canada interest rates, that if you were to apply that exercise to that $600 billion, that $600 billion that we put into Canada, right, would actually be a number something closer to 6 or 7 trillion that Canada owes us. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's really clear that everybody needs to understand that all of the stupidity that Trudeau's been engaged in the last 2 years, putting $600 billion into CERB payments, as opposed to putting the goddamn money into our hospitals where it was needed, right? So, we're not going to be paying any of that money when we leave. And that's my view on the matter. And I just wanted to make that clear.
Awesome. Yeah. And this one we're going to ask to both. Obviously, we've got Alberta Prosperity Project and Free Alberta Strategy representatives here. So first, I'll start with you there, Rob. How long would it look like to stay within Canada before you guys would move to Plan B? Like, would there be a point where we go, maybe this isn't working now, let's try the referendum, or is that not in the picture?
No, you have to, anybody who's been involved in any form of negotiation knows full well that you have to have a viable walk-away strategy, or else you'll never get anywhere in a negotiation. So you can't, like this idea that, you see premiers constantly saying over and over again, oh, well, we would never hold a vote on separation. That's insanity. You've given away your entire bargaining position at that point. They're just going to keep laughing at you. So no, the Free Alberta strategy, the idea is, look, these are things we can do right now. Get the ball, we'll take our sovereignty back, make Alberta essentially sovereign jurisdiction within Canada. But look, the feds, how they respond, that's the great wild card. They might respond well. You never know. You get a good government. Maybe Pierre's in there. Maybe somebody else is in there. Who knows? Maybe they say, you know what? We're going to renegotiate this. We're going to give more power to the provinces. We got to fix this, or we're going to lose this country. They might, or they might not. There could be Justin Trudeau or Jagmeet Singh, or who knows who else, Stephen Guilbeault. And if that's the case, and we've done everything we can, and and still that's not enough, and still they impose economic sanctions against us, which is what they've done. Then at that point, absolutely, you got to have the referendum question, in my view.
But just to be clear, and this will be of no surprise to you, as far as I'm concerned, Plan B is a morning after pill, and the time is now.
Wait, I'm gonna ask one question though, Jeff, here, because I'm gonna challenge him a little bit on that. What in the hell have we done over the last 40 years? We have not done anything to assert our sovereignty within Canada. Nothing. So shouldn't we start there and then see what happens?
You were the one that was in the legislature. What the hell's the UCP in the Alberta legislature?
Great. Hey, I don't disagree. I'm not blaming you for the inaction. That's for sure. I'm saying that if we get a chance we got to start somewhere. We can't just, a lot of these plans that we've talked about today that I've heard, they're fantastic, but these are 10 to 15, 20-year projects. Let me explain that. Right now, if you hold that referendum question in the province of Alberta, tell me what you think it'll be. What would be the question to secede? Like, what would be the percentage that say yes to that? You think it would be 80%. What if I told you that every poll I've ever seen on that would likely put it at about 25%?
Well, let's have a campaign and find out. That's my point.
Yeah.
And again,
but if you do that,
but just let me
sure.
give you my 2 cents on it. I mean, again, we're all adults here. Why can't we have a say in how this province is being run? If everybody is so confident that it's only 30% support, let's have a public campaign where this is the only issue that's being debated, and have a true poll from every community in this province as to how they feel
fair.
about it. Because I'll tell you what, if we had a referendum tomorrow and we ran 2 referendum questions at the same time,
Yeah.
one, the question that APP is supporting, we leave Canada debt free, and 2, that the new Alberta government will commit itself to balanced budgets and a flat 10% tax, and have both referendums at the same time, I think the answer would be closer to 60 or 70%.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I just worry that if we get, let's say we do it and we only get 25 to 30, if we walk before run before we walk, so to speak, and we only get 25 to 30%, do we set our entire movement back a generation by doing that? That's my worry. I want to make sure we win this.
Nothing but picking our pockets clean
Great.
by threatening like a
Totally
little
agree.
baby to leave Confederation every time they want more money from the rest of us.
That's fair.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with polling Albertans on the issue.
Oh, that's fair. Fair point, Jeff.
And this is also why we're advocating, why we discussed this 3.5% strategy by Erica Chenoweth, which is if you 3.5% of a relevant population will dictate sorry about the feedback, will dictate the way that the society moves. And so when you look at that FAQ section on the Alberta Prosperity Project's website, and when you look at that title, which states, what is the timeline to get control of our destiny? You hold an election in 2023. Well, no, you don't. We have to have one. We have one in 2023. But the Alberta Prosperity Project and other educational projects aren't going away. We'll continue to educate as many Albertans as possible on these benefits and merits of independence. Because it's quite correct. If we hold a referendum and knowing that we're going to get 20%, well, that won't work at all. We have to be guaranteed and know that we're going to receive this solid, absolute, clear majority so that the rest of Canada recognizes exactly what we're doing. And so the membership numbers with the APP are a large part of that metric. There are other polling metrics, of course, that can be employed. And I suppose to conclude, it means that it is up to us as Albertans to push this thing forward. If all of us work as hard as we can and tell as many individuals as we can about the benefits and merits of independence, then that referendum can be held sooner rather than later.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. And a couple more questions here, and then we will be finished up and let you guys be getting out soon. Question maybe, obviously this is a bit more of an APP question, but has there been consultation with First Nations people about the referendum? And if so, how do we execute with federal First Nation treaties? How would we work around that?
That's actually one of the things that I'm the proudest of, is that we've recruited Chief Lawrence Courteray to the board of directors of APP. And Lawrence and I have consulted with the Aboriginal community or the Indigenous community in Alberta, and have come up with a very comprehensive Indigenous sovereignty plan to make sure that Indigenous nations of Alberta are full partners in Alberta sovereignty. And the program that Lawrence and I have developed in consultation with our friends and colleagues in the Indigenous community, I can guarantee you, once we start rolling that out across the province, and once the Indigenous nations of Alberta truly understand the benefits of what we're proposing, that we'll have over 90% support. Because let's keep in mind what's been going on here with the Indigenous community. Well, Trudeau was flying in his private jet over Kamloops last year on National Aboriginal Day to go surfing with his buddies in Tofino. People in this province, in Northern Alberta, still don't have clean drinking water. So let's keep that in mind, how well the Liberals have treated the Indigenous people of this country. And certainly, and again, if Dennis was here, he usually does plays all the foundational things that Tanner and I miss. But one of the issues, do people in this room know that we send $60 billion a year to Ottawa and we only get $27 billion back? So there's $33 billion a year that are leaving this province and not coming back, because all the money is going to pay for subsidized daycare in Quebec and not in Alberta. So certainly out of that $33 billion, we can afford to come up with a meaningful resource revenue sharing program with Alberta Indigenous nations that would lift them out of poverty, right? and still afford a flat 10% tax rate across the board in this province because of the wealth that we can generate when we work together as hardworking, industrious Albertans.
Did you want to touch on that as well, First Nations, or no? You're good? Sounds good. Perfect. Next question here that we've got is being landlocked a concern at all for Alberta if we do the Sovereignty Act or become independent? Is that ever going to be a concern for us?
That's a good question. With regards to independence, is landlocking a concern? Well, I would begin by answering that geographically it's true. If you take the definition, we're landlocked. But really, Alberta is policy locked, much more than landlocking. I mean this, of course, insofar as we, for example, can't get a pipeline built. We can't build the meaningful capacity that we require in order to ship our oil specifically to where it needs to go. But let's talk about the problem of landlocking. So firstly, it's a common misconception that the vast majority of our trade is executed with nations across the oceans. It's not. The vast majority of our trade, and COVID has skewed the numbers a little bit, but let's take it in 2019, 2020, before all of this nonsense occurred. 90+% of Alberta's trade is engaged with America, with our friends to the south. And of course, we trade with provincial borders as well. The same is true of oil. Canada exports 3.8 million barrels of oil per day. But that does not go to Europe immediately. That does not go to Asia. The vast majority of that oil, 98%, heads south of the border to America. Now, Canada has the third largest oil reserves in the world. Massive, huge. 98+% of those reserves are located in the oil sands in Alberta. So, if Alberta became independent, Canada's ranking in the world when it comes to the surplus of proven oil would fall from third down to about 22nd, 23rd. And of course, Alberta would take that third spot. Just Alberta alone right now is fourth, right? Because Canada's third, but if you take away that, then we become fourth. So we have a vast, vast ocean of oil. But then this speaks also to the idea of leverage, insofar as what happens to our oil? Well, it goes south, but it also goes throughout Canada. So we have Trans Mountain, which starts in central Alberta, and then it heads up to, or through to BC, to Burnaby, to be refined for Vancouver for their jet fuel at the airport. And then, of course, we also have a pipeline that goes east, goes to Toronto, goes to Ontario, even goes to Montreal, to believe it or not, to two massive refineries to be used there. But then, as I said, it goes south. It heads to America. There are monstrous refineries in America, huge ones, in the Midwest and in other locations. The reason I said other locations is because there's really one spot where we want to go. We want to get our oil to the Gulf Coast, down in the far, far south. The reason for that is because the Gulf Coast is the largest refinery, and it hosts the largest refineries for heavy sour oil or heavy oil in the world. And that's what we predominantly have here in Alberta. Our oil is heavy. And so if we can ship it, or if we could ship it down to the Gulf where it could be, and if we could do it efficiently, well, then of course our oil would have much more marketability and we'd receive higher prices, more proper prices. So if you became independent, you would have control of that, so to say, right? You would have, for the first time, proper Alberta negotiators negotiating with America for access. We could build a pipeline straight south, right down if you wanted to. You say, but what about America? The question is valid. Of course, we can't control what American presidents do. But again, what was the first thing that Mr. Trudeau did after Keystone XL was canceled? The first thing he did was he appointed Stephen Guilbeault, who's this noted anti-pipeline activist, to minister for the environment and climate change. And so you see, Mr. Trudeau says one thing, we support Alberta's oil, but he speaks another. And as Jeff already mentioned, 2030 comes the execution of our oil industry. I might also mention one more thing. In America, of course, they use a lot of oil. It's a large country. Canada is the #1 exporter of oil to America. It's critical, it's important. The second largest exporter of oil to America is Mexico. Now, they export about some 800,000 barrels of oil per day, and that goes to the Gulf Coast. It's almost the same oil, it's heavy as well. But next year, it's just been announced that Mexico is totally shutting in which means that not one drop of oil will be exported from Mexico to America, meaning there is going to be an 800,000 barrel of oil per day shortage or discrepancy in America that's going to need to be filled. And here we are in Alberta with so much oil that's just ready to go. It's right there. If only we could build a pipeline. So it's this idea of leverage. You see now, one more quickly, I know this is long, I'm sorry, but one more thing. What about grain and so on? Fair enough, because grain does go overseas. As again, you know, we produce a lot of it along with Saskatchewan, and other commodities are shipped to ports, and then they cross the oceans, along with being traded within Canada, et cetera, et cetera. What about that? What if Canada, after Alberta gained its independence, was playing hardball and became grumpy and upset that we were independent? Well, let's look at the Vancouver port, one of the largest in the continent. It's huge. It's a phenomenal size. Automobiles, goods, computers, grain, massive grain terminals are located there. It's a huge port, and Eastern Canada, along with Western Canada, relies on it for the trade of goods, particularly, you know, automobiles and meats and all of these things. If we became independent and Canada was upset about it, you could so easily say, fine, if you wish to play hardball, not only could we turn off the taps, which is a credible threat, because of course we have the capacity to self-sustain, we could also put a tariff on every single good that is shipped to or from the Vancouver port from the east. And if that still wasn't enough to get Ottawa's attention, we could say not one single good is going to come through Alberta until you give us access to that Vancouver port. So, but I might say quickly, I do not see any reason whatsoever for Canada and Alberta to be at odds about this. You know, we're neighbors. We intend to be friends. We're not enemies. And the same is true with America. There are UN charters and so on that allow access for landlocked nations to the sea, and trading is mutually beneficial. Otherwise, individuals wouldn't engage in it. The same is true with Canada and Alberta. So why not trade? I'm so excited about the future that this would bring, because you would have leverage, you'd have proper negotiation, and I think our trade and our relations with other nations would be better than they have ever been.
And then on an added note, think about what we could do in Alberta with an extra 10 or $15 billion a year to put into private-public partnerships to drastically increase our own refining capacity in Alberta, so that we could actually be, actually refining our own oil here in Alberta and shipping out gasoline and diesel instead.
Perfect. All right. And this is one final question before I'll get to Shannon to come up and close. And it is in regard to the World Economic Forum. For those that haven't heard episode 3 of the podcast, Alberta Prosperity Project, check it out. We do talk about that. Had to give that little plug. I had to. Yeah.
I was going to say a quick thing. So Hunter's like the Johnny Carson of the podcast. Hey, it's great. It's a lot of fun. But this is just something so we were talking about the youth and how important it is to get the youth involved in this movement, and any movement for that matter, with regards to asserting our sovereignty. You have to engage them perhaps in different means than what is otherwise classic and the status quo, because it's a different generation. So I want to let you know about the numbers of this podcast, because they're so encouraging. We've started the podcast 3 weeks ago. We've done 3 episodes, 1 episode per week. The average age has been between 27 to 29. So a fantastic age when we're talking about, political discussions and so on. But the viewership is the listening-ship has been what's most encouraging. We started with 4,000 listeners on the first podcast. Then we went to 6,000 on the next podcast. On this third one, we've already surpassed 10,000 listeners. So exciting. That was just a quick plug. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that. It is super exciting to see, and it's cool. The app lets me see where everyone listens and just the average age. It's very, very cool. The Alberta Prosperity Project podcast. Yep, you betcha.
And we're for sure going to have the gentleman on very soon. It'd be great to have guests, and it's exciting, very exciting.
Absolutely. Yes. So, like I said, final question here, and this is in regards to the World Economic Forum's agenda to restructure the free and democratic spirit of Alberta that we have. What exactly are your thoughts on how we would stop the World Economic Forum, I guess, from coming to Alberta for everyone? There we go. We'll figure out how to get that.
Oh boy. So one of the, I absolutely agree with, I forget who was talking about earlier, that one of the greatest threats to our sovereignty and to our way of life right now is ceding authority over our healthcare system to the World Health Organization or the World Economic Forum. They are absolutely the enemy, and we got to just call them that. And to our friends, neighbors, people have to understand that their goal is to take our resources. It is to control us without having any democratic recourse to do anything about it. They're dangerous. And so that's why I think one of the first uses of the Alberta Sovereignty Act or the Constitution or anything that's done has to be an invocation that notwithstanding any national or international law that purports to control our healthcare system and regulations, that within the boundaries of Alberta, we will not recognize those treaties. We will not recognize any of those policies. We will run our own healthcare system, period.
It's no coincidence at all that in July of 2020, as our lives were turning into a living hell in this province, that Alberta Health Services proudly announced its partnership with the World Economic Forum. And I think everybody in this room, I think all of us need to pay attention to this. All of the corporations that are partnered with the WEF, to the extent that we can boycott them, we should. Be it TELUS, BHP, whatever it is. That's our future if we don't wake up. I mean, the very definition of fascism is Klaus Schwab's vision as to how the group in Davos is going to run the rest of the world and our lives going into the future. And for people that don't get that, they obviously didn't do much reading in and around World War II.
Just one quick thing. I would totally agree with what's been said. They're dead on the mark. As far as I can tell, this is one of the reasons why we're advocating, not as far as I can tell, this is one of the reasons why we're advocating so strongly for a republic. And the reason is because in a republic, it's a rule by objective law. You see, what I've been able to observe and what it seems to me is that those men and women in Davos and the WEF and the WHO, they believe they are the law. They're not ruled by law, they become the law. But you see, it's in the law that we discover how to act human, right? When the law says thou shalt not steal and the Constitution says you will not steal, it tells you how to act in civilization as beings that are higher than those that are within the animal kingdom. And so it's not even so much that those WEF members are bad men. They are bad men, but rather they're not men at all anymore. They've stepped outside of the bounds of humanity. And as you know, this is bad. It's objectively evil. It's objectively wrong. So this is why it's so critical, as Rob has mentioned, as Jeff has mentioned, to completely and absolutely declare our absolute opposition to such organizations.
Perfect. Well, just as I call Shannon up, what do we say we give these people actually a standing ovation? That was wonderful. Thank you so much.